Well, still getting back into the swing of things. Welcome back to it. We'll see how the live stream does after not having it go via live for what feels like 3 weeks or so. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you for being with us and for sticking around. We've, of course, got to tackle the final day of Illinois' gun and magazine ban trial, and hopefully the computer systems, which I just fired back up here at my home studio after having several weeks off, including all of this week, essentially being on the road, going to East St. Louis to cover the gun ban trial in the Barnett v. Raoul case. So definitely enjoy seeing people pile in here to the live stream. Once things get really up to speed here and any kind of glitches are worked out, I think we'll be good to go. But really do appreciate you guys being part of the program each and every morning. And if you don't follow me on X, really encourage you to do that, especially for things like we saw this past week in the courtroom. Of course, as a member of the media, getting permission to have a cell phone, have a computer in the courtroom to report out. I could not do any live broadcasts of audio or video. Couldn't take pictures within the court building, but I can send out messages via X. So if you followed along with that all throughout the week, you've really got a detailed view of what was going on inside the courtroom in the case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. We've, of course, been tracking this for ever since it passed, even before that. And if you followed me either on my personal channel before we came over to America's Talking Network, hopefully you've got a good base of understanding of where we're at and why we're where we're at, right? So we'll talk a lot about that. And that's going to be the only segment today. As we wrap up the week, it's Friday. Really do appreciate seeing everybody in the live chat this morning. And if you don't follow us live, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for America's Talking Network, where you can stay up to date when we go live. And about 8 o'clock every morning, when we're not on the road, we can obviously bring you this live program to keep you plugged in. But about 8 o'clock in the morning Central, come to America's Talking Network, and you should see that live stream start. I mean, a lot of activity in the chat room as well, including John, Ed, James, Tattooed Squirrel, which, by the way, still got my Tattooed Squirrel patch. Also, Festus and Captain Mike and Dimitri and Christopher, Oscar Mike, Tenebris, a variety of others who've been in the chat room regularly. So appreciate you guys coming back after what seems to be close to 3 weeks or so, if not more, that we've been off here with America's Talking Network live for Illinois in Focus Daily. Get the podcast anywhere as well, Illinois in Focus. Just search that and you'll be able to find it. And of course, the weekend edition as well with my executive editor, Dan McCaleb. We talk about not just the gun ban case, but a variety of other stories. Some things coming up that we're going to be covering in detail at thecentersquare.com is the corruption trial against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. That's set to start in October. And you've got a lot of filings that are happening from Madigan's attorneys looking to ultimately try to limit who can testify. And recently this week, you had a federal judge say that a professor of politics who understands the Chicago political machine can testify. So that's going to be interesting to watch that happen. That starts next month. And then, of course, we've got a run up to the election in early November. We'll try to dissect a variety of different things of how the election is going to play out. Early voting, by the way, starts in like 6 days. So a lot of mail-in ballots are going to be sent out. People may choose to, take that ballot and then return it when they go physically vote in person, or they may choose to send their ballot in via mail or a ballot drop box, or to deliver that to their county election officials. So we'll talk a lot about the election and also try to take a look at some of the key races, both in Congress and throughout the Illinois State House. So a lot to tackle here in the in the run-up to fall. And then after the election, you've got the fall veto session at the Illinois State House, where we'll be embedded at the State House in the basement media room with Blue Room Stream, giving you all the stuff you need to know of how your tax dollars are being spent. So a lot to tackle, all right? So I want to, again, appreciate everybody who tuned in. Take a brief breather, and then get into the final day of the Gun Ban Challenge down in East St. Louis, and some pretty incredible comments coming from Judge Stephen McGlynn. So stay tuned. That's coming up here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning for Illinois in Focus Daily. In wrapping up the bench trial against Illinois' gun and magazine ban, Judge Stephen McGlynn invokes the history of race riots from East St. Louis to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and even highlighting a recent incident in Aurora, Colorado of a transnational gang with high-powered rifles kicking in doors of an apartment building, and asking what if these individual victims were armed. Interesting question to wrap up a trial challenging the state's gun and magazine ban. Welcome in. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Join us each and every weekday morning as we bring you the latest of what's happening here in Illinois with Illinois in Focus and the Center Square. So again, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for America's Talking Network. I was in the East St. Louis federal courtroom each and every day of the trial this week. It started Monday and went all throughout yesterday, Thursday, where it wrapped up with the plaintiffs resting and the defense resting. And then Judge Stephen McGlynn shared some comments. And I do want to go through his comments in particular. But before we do that, let's follow what happened here on X. And if you don't follow me on X, just search Bishop on Air and you can follow that, where you can find the thread from each day of the court hearing this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with dozens of posts of the best I could do on my phone, trying to distill down some of the things that they're talking about. And if you've never had to do that in rapid succession, well, while it's being discussed in the courtroom, trying to distill it down, a lot of mistypings and misspellings, and I think I got pure competitor mixed up with peer competitor when talking about military opponents. Maybe I slipped on some of the firearms that were being discussed, but ultimately you should get a general idea by looking at that X thread from each day as to what took place in the courtroom. So let's get into it. All right, so we'll actually kind of start with the plaintiffs in their final statements when they wrap things up. So here we go. We've got litigants discussing exhibits. They set some time aside for closing arguments. With the plaintiffs, they said the case addresses constitutional question whether commonly owned semi-automatic firearms can be banned by Illinois. They say it doesn't stand constitutional muster. They say pistol grips, forward grips, collapsible stocks, barrel shrouds, threaded barrel, changing magazine for more rounds, useful for self-defense, and is not a militaristic feature. They note that the state's expert, Colonel Tucker, said that changing magazines leaves you vulnerable. And plaintiff's expert witness, Watt, he said people are on their own in self-defense. Banned firearms are used for self-defense, the plaintiff said. They say such guns with features are ideal for self-defense, says no military in real-world issues across the world. They don't issue semi-automatic only rifles. Military spec requires burst or full auto. Even Colonel Tucker for the defense said don't prohibit burst or full auto from military. It goes on with some more of the plaintiff's arguments here. They lay out their ultimate final thoughts, saying features are commonly owned for lawful purposes and they train with defense in mind. Experts recognize the use of such for self-defense, and they also point to their first witness, Scott Pulaski, the owner of Piasaw Armory, who said only Illinois resident to testify, recommended that semi-automatic firearms for self-defense to his customers before they were ultimately banned. They say shotguns with detachable magazines and magazines with more than 5 rounds are common for self-defense, and they are set to provide a lengthy amount of documents to support all of this. And the court should find that the Protect Illinois Communities Act is unconstitutional and enter a permanent injunction against Illinois from enforcing. Then they end their closing. Now, I do want to take just a brief moment here to kind of elaborate a bit on, why they're talking about the difference between military firearms and civilian firearms, and that's because the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, on preliminary grounds, laid out that the state had a likelihood of succeeding on the merits of the case because they said that AR-15 rifles, for example, are too adjacent and too similar to what's used in the military. A lot of the testimony, if you look at the threads from throughout the week, really focused on differentiating between military firearms that are made to go burst or full auto versus civilian firearms that are semi-automatic only. Everything from the metallurgy to the materials and such. So they laid that out in some painstaking detail. So then you get into the state's closing arguments, and let's pull this up for you. Again, you can see this on X, where they said the key question was about the material difference between civilian and military weapons. Experts agree that military trains with M16 and M4 on semi-automatic. Other fact is being put in focus. Both have grips, adjustable stock, flash suppressors, etc., with high rate of fire to kill enemies. Features are same, except select fire switch. They quote the plaintiff's witness, Gunner Eby. They also quote Ronkanen, who was a plaintiff's witness from Remington, about innovations for AR rifles, but no change to make safer civilians being shot at, the defense said. They say plaintiffs admits both civilian and military fire the same ammunition. Other facts, they say Illinois law prohibits .50 caliber. They say that that's rarely sold and can hit target from a mile away. They say that the plaintiff's witness, Watts, keeps AR pistols out of traditional pistol training. They say that no one told us that they use these for duck hunting. They said that hearsay from Scott Pulaski about why people buy. And again, if you missed some of that from earlier in the week, Pulaski said that some of the documents that he has people fill out asks why you're buying these particular firearms, and nobody says they do it for unlawful reasons, and a lot of people say it's for self-defense, but they said that's hearsay. Ronkanen said demand increased after the federal ban. They also quote Gunner Eby, again a plaintiff's witness, saying that he prefers AR-15 for self-defense only because full auto isn't legal. Finally, the state says plaintiff's witness, Watt, didn't provide real evidence, just anecdotes from people who self-select for his Warriors Creed self-defense courses. So the state says semi-automatic guns aren't suitable for self-defense. They say it fits dangerous and unusual weapons and definition between what's good for civilians and police, and they ask for Judge Stephen McGlynn to uphold the law, and then they end their closing. All right, so now let's get into Judge Stephen McGlynn's comments here, which kind of made everybody take a step back for a moment. All right, you figure he would say, all right, appreciate everybody's time, take this under advisement, but instead he talked for probably about 10 or 15 minutes. And I'm just, again, this is not a full verbatim transcript. The transcript of the trial will come out from the federal court soon. This is just a preliminary rough review, a distillation of what was said. So McGlynn, he says it's an important case and expects filings on history and tradition. So, they didn't really go into the history and tradition during the live testimony. They really seemed to just focus on addressing the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals issue about military and civilian firearms, as they claim were too adjacent. But I expect the filings in the next 30 days are really going to focus on that history and tradition, text history and tradition from the Bruin precedent out of the U.S. Supreme Court. But it goes on to say that when case started, McGlynn questioned where it'll go. He also questioned why it's in East St. Louis. He said sacred sites are all around East St. Louis. He says it's important to recognize people sustained losses in East St. Louis. On 8th Street, there was a hospital where he said he was born and his twin brother were born. And then he projects an image, and again, rough transcript. I thought I heard 1970. It's actually 1917. But looking south, it shows burned areas from a riot. A man's house was burned, he said, for being black. The sacred site. End of court parking lot was an old Broadway theater. Word got out, black families were hiding in there. That was burned down. Nobody escaped. During the course of riots, 100 black armed were shooting back at the rioters. And the rioters said that's not fair. They went to the National Guard to complain. The Guard then gave safe passage to those black victims across the Eads Bridge into St. Louis. Another area, McGlynn said, line of demarcation. He points to the picture, and there was an arrow pointing to a building in that picture from 1917, surrounded by debris. And he said the building that's being pointed to was the courtroom we all were sitting in at that time. He says to him, it looks like Vietnam. Says everything that families owned were burned by the mob. More of what McGlynn said, all black houses were set on fire one by one as people escaped to other houses that were burned. One man beat in the head with an iron pipe with a noose around his neck, not long enough to be hanged, but they dragged him. At 4th and Broadway in East St. Louis, there's a fountain in a park. A St. Louis Reporter saw a body in there with one guy being pulled to be hung, with people saying, pull for East St. Louis. The mob prevented ambulances from helping. They stopped streetcars and dragged blacks out and beat them. McGlynn continued talking about other areas where they found a body of a child being essentially cremated. Others hiding in homes nearby, frightened, and fire from house to house while their house was collapsing around them. People were horribly burned, and the community lost everything. McGlynn wonders... He wonders if they tried to make a stand. They were poorly armed, he said. Fleeing from the mob, jumping in the Mississippi, off the bridge for certain death. What if they had some of these weapons, he asked. Who knows? Then he discusses Tulsa, Oklahoma. Black neighborhoods there, very nice. 1921, same thing happened. Mob sets upon them, burned and killed. More recent, he points to Aurora, Colorado, where international gangsters, well armed, going door to door, attacking. That video out of Aurora recently was 30 days after police were called. He said that they were on their own. Maybe a kid was hiding under a bed asking, Mom, are the bad guys gone? He says this is all part of our history, going to confront evil people throughout our lives. He says going to be called for self-defense of the community. And of the country, he also said. With respect to what we have here today, Second Amendment has nothing to say, some may say. She's too old, she's lost luster, maybe too senile. But he also encouraged people, the litigants and those in attendance, before leaving East St. Louis, stop by those sites. Never know what's going to happen to you in your life. That's why this case is important. He doesn't question the sincerity of the litigants on either side. And then he wrapped things up, said 30 days to submit briefs. We are adjourned. So clearly some really strong history shared from Stephen McGlynn to wrap up the case and seeming to ask that question. What if these black victims of historic riots, not just in East St. Louis in 1917, but Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, and even in Springfield, Illinois, you had a race riot of 1908. What if these black victims were armed? Does that indicate how McGlynn will rule in this? Again, a question that is yet to be seen, but ultimately he will make his determination. And after 30 days, when they file the briefs back and forth, could he issue a permanent injunction on final judgment? And then move that case ultimately up to the appeals court? And how quick will that happen? We heard earlier this week from attorney Thomas Magg for the Langley plaintiffs that he expects that to happen within 20 minutes. So we'll be watching this closely over the next 30 days to see what's filed about text history and tradition from both sides. We'll then obviously hear and read through what Judge McGlynn orders. Does he issue a permanent injunction halting enforcement of the law? How long would that permanent injunction last for? Again, questions that we have yet to get those answers to. and we could get those within 30 days. But some people looking at McGlynn's comments there as indication of how he may rule in this case. After last year, recall, McGlynn did issue that preliminary injunction against the law that lasted for 6 days before the appeals court took it up and reversed that and then ruled in favor of the state. But clearly, now on the merits, this is final judgment that we're looking for. Then it'll go to the appeals court and then to the U.S. Supreme Court. However, you do have that Maryland ban that is likely in front of the U.S. Supreme Court well before Illinois' gun and magazine ban gets to that space. So a lot to be said about all of this. Again, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. I was in the courtroom all week long, back at the home studio here. So if you missed any of the proceedings that I posted on X, go to x.com/Bishop on Air, and you'll be able to check that out. All right, it is Bishop on Air here with Illinois in Focus Daily, America's Talking Network, and the Center Square. Greatly appreciate you tuning in each and every weekday morning. We'll have another segment here and hear from attorney David Siegel for the Harrell plaintiffs, sharing some of his thoughts about the final day of court action in the case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban. Stay tuned. Attorney for the plaintiffs in the gun ban challenge reacting to the judge invoking histories of black citizens in the United States being victims of mob attacks and asking the questions, what if they had these very weapons that they discussed all throughout the week during that bench trial. Back at it with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning here as we go live, but also breaking out these individual segments. So let's get into it. Of course, in the previous segment, we detailed a lot of what the judge in the case, Stephen McGlynn, said in his closing, wrapping up the case, challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban, invoking images of the 1917 race riot in East St. Louis, where he said 30-plus people officially in the fatality category, but he believes it was much higher. You can imagine hundreds injured, lynched, essentially. Just horrible history. But then he also talked about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he talked about recently in Aurora, Colorado, where people were victimized by a transnational gang with high-powered rifles. And again, asking that question, what if these individuals had these rifles that they themselves were discussing throughout all this past week in East St. Louis? After the conclusion of the trial, connected with David Siegel. He is the plaintiff's attorney for the Harrell plaintiffs in the Illinois State Rifle Association, and he shared with us his initial thoughts of what Judge Stephen McGlynn had to say in closing out the case.
I will tell you that it really resonated with me personally. And in fact, the entire reason how I became involved in this topic in the first place was from the angle of the view, from that viewpoint, let's say, of self-defense. And so that kind of tragedy, how does it not resonate with you? There's countless stories of people victimized, whether it's for race or their gender or because someone's bigger or just thinks they can, and suddenly someone walking down the street is a victim, or someone sitting in their home and or sleeping in their home, or or sitting up reading a book, who knows, they're suddenly in a split second they're a potential victim. And the issues in this case, you know, so, you know, for some is the difference between victim, you know, potential victim and actual victim. And, you know, I think that that's why Judge McGlynn was telling that history of this town, and you know, why the plaintiffs in this case, you know, why it's so important to them.
So we had a moment to also talk with David Siegel about the final defense witness, and that was retired Lieutenant Colonel Jason Dempsey. And he laid out his career in the military, serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, commanding troops, and also training troops. And he said that, again, a defense witness, he recommends only training in semi-automatic, and they only trained in semi-automatic. He doesn't recommend burst or full auto. And he also laid out, you know, the importance of having a machine gun operator versus the rifles that troops would carry, and saying that, you know, machine gun operator would be able to provide suppressive fire, and those carrying the rifles really should only use semi-automatic. So it seemed that the defense was using some of that testimony to try to say, listen, semi-automatic fires used primarily in the military when it comes to these types of, you know, M16s or M4s. But later in cross-examination, you had some interesting things brought up as well. But just to the general opinion from Dempsey as the defense witness, essentially saying, hey, military trains in semi-automatic mode primarily, and they don't recommend full auto when it comes to, you know, approaching an enemy, because it's wasteful and it's not accurate, and they went into some great detail about all of that. The plaintiffs coming back, highlighting various military doctrine about, say, you know, putting up a line of defense when you're being attacked in an airborne capacity. It says, you know, military doctrine, they pulled it up in documents showing that use every available fully automatic weapon possible. You know, no ammunition waste is to be worried about. I mean, that wasn't a full quote, but something like that, right? So if you're getting attacked from a helicopter, use every amount of full auto or automatic weapons that you can. Dempsey would push back on that and say, well, you know, the certain firearm that they had didn't go full auto, it was just burst. But Dempsey still would say that he recommends only using semi-automatic in the military because, well, they are more accurate, he says. So asking Siegel, the plaintiff's attorney, about Dempsey's overall testimony, he shared his thoughts.
Colonel Dempsey obviously is a man to be respected, and I appreciate his service. And he obviously has, you know, the kind of the definition of one man's opinion. I think that the other evidence that we've heard in the courtroom and that is going to be presented to the court very, you know, is contradicts that. But of course, you know, Judge McGlynn is going to you know, consider all the evidence, including that of the live witnesses, and he's going to come to his own conclusions based on, you know, following what the Seventh Circuit said.
So Dempsey was also asked by the plaintiffs a variety of questions in cross-examination, and let me pull up this X post here from the court yesterday, where I was feverishly posting these updates. Plaintiffs turned to question Dempsey, asked about personal ownership of a Sig Sauer AR semi-automatic rifle with 30-round magazine standard, purchased additional magazines for it, has attachments, added a pistol grip, barrel shroud, flash suppressor. Dempsey says he also reviewed Illinois' gun ban law, and he agrees Illinois bans rifle that he owns for personal use. Dempsey also says his opinion, and again, this is the defense witness, says his opinion is for training, not banning outright. He wants training and accountability. So getting Siegel's response to that, coming from the defense witness, who was there to try to support the ban, saying he doesn't favor the ban, he would rather see training and accountability. Here's some of what Siegel had to say in response to that.
I mean, obviously, from the pure standpoint of sitting at the plaintiff's table, it was interesting to hear, but again, insofar as it's not as if the state legislature is going to suddenly, go back and change its law or repeal its law, based on what Mr. or Colonel Dempsey said. I mean, it was certainly an interesting comment, and I'm sure Judge McGlynn will consider it in the mix. But again, I think it was one man's just a part of one man's opinion.
So again, Siegel sharing his thoughts, but also he was asked about the overall strength of the evidence and the testimony presented during live testimony.
Well, the first thing is that you have to remember that this week of live testimony is only part of the evidence that is going to be submitted to the court, and that is by agreement with the parties. It's by order of the court of how the judge wanted all of this to proceed. But if you're just asking me what did I think of the witnesses that the plaintiffs presented, I thought they were very impressive and knowledgeable, and but again, I don't want to say anything that implies anything other than the judge is going to review all the evidence. He was obviously paying careful attention to all the testimony, had insightful questions for the witnesses, and he's going to weigh all of it and make those determinations. But I thought that the witnesses that we presented, I thought they were very impressive and knowledgeable, and we certainly hope the judge agrees.
Again, the case wrapping up yesterday in East St. Louis, and the live testimony really focused on differentiating between military firearms and those that are available on the civilian market before Illinois' ban, of course, like the AR-15, semi-automatic only, being different than the military rifles that would be burst or full auto switchable. And Siegel shares some of his thoughts just about that briefly here.
Well, first, I think that's among the chief legal questions that the judge is going to have to answer. So suffice it to say, I disagree very strongly with such an argument.
Again, Siegel talking with members of the media, including myself, after yesterday's hearing. But he was asked again to reflect on the judge's final comments. We heard a lot of that in the previous segment, reviewing some of the live posts I made from the courtroom yesterday. Of course, that's all a rush transcript, and the full transcript will be released by the court before too long that people can get access to. But he talked about the race riots. So Siegel again, reiterates the impact that had, because McGlynn said, these victims of violence, these black communities that had their houses burned down in East St. Louis, what if they had these firearms that were being debated during court this week? Here's Siegel again.
I think the first thing I took away from it is, first and foremost, that the judge cares very deeply about this town. and this city and its history. And I have no other perspective, to compare or contrast it with anything else that he says, or that he has said. So, but, so just based on that one recounting, tell you what, I don't want to speculate on what the judge was thinking. I can only tell you what I was thinking is that it brought me back to when I first was asked to become involved in this topic. And now I'm probably giving you more than you're asking for. But when I first got involved in this topic and I was asked, and it was actually for the McDonald versus Chicago Supreme Court case. That's the very first time that I was involved in this. And I was asked, is this something I want to be a part of, think about it, controversy, etc., etc. And right around that same exact time that I was asked about that, there's stories up in Chicago, like in the past month, like 2 or 3, of women who were killed with 911 on the phone in one hand and a useless restraining order in the other. And when I was asked that question, I thought, if there's something I can maybe do to help the next one who's significant X other whatever is going to come after them, and there's something I can do, shouldn't I? And I feel that way about this, and I felt that way hearing Judge McGlynn tell the story about the tragedy that befell this town in whatever year that it was. So that's really all that's all I can tell you. I don't want to speculate on what exactly the Judge McGlynn was thinking when he told that story, but obviously that story in this city is very important to him.
So a lot to be said about the 4 days of bench trial in Illinois' gun and magazine ban on final judgment. Expect to get some kind of ruling after 30 days that the litigants have to file final documents and arguments about text history and tradition. We'll be reviewing that as soon as that comes out. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Join us each and every weekday morning here with America's Talking Network and thecentersquare.com. We'll see you back here on Monday. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend.